Rain-slicked cobblestones glistened under the dim glow of street lamps, reflecting the quiet, tense rhythm of a village under occupation. The air was thick with mist and the scent of damp wood and coal smoke from chimneys. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle cut sharply through the fog, a sound that carried unease as much as routine. Inside a modest bakery on the village square, Pierre, the baker, wiped flour from his hands and listened to the patter of rain against the windows. Outside, the muted clatter of German boots echoed along the alleys, a constant reminder that the war had seeped into every corner of civilian life. On the floor near the hearth, a small toy train lay forgotten, its metal wheels coated with a thin layer of flour dust. It had been left by Pierre's young son earlier that morning, rolling along the wooden planks and clattering softly as it traced invisible tracks. At first glance, it was a child's toy, meaningless and innocent. Yet that misplaced train would become an unlikely instrument in uncovering a spy network operating quietly in the heart of occupied France. Pierre's routine had been ordinary, unremarkable: bread kneaded at dawn, loaves baked in the warm ovens, villagers stopping by for daily rations. But that morning, as he kicked the toy train aside, his gaze lingered on the glint of something unusual half hidden beneath the counter: a folded note, damp from the rain, with strange symbols scrawled in ink too precise to be casual. A shiver ran down his spine. In the silence of the bakery, amid the comforting smells of yeast and warm bread, Pierre realized he had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than flour or firewood. A German spy courier had passed through the village, leaving a trace that no one else had noticed. This was the paradox of war. In a landscape dominated by uniformed soldiers, guns, and ration cards, it was a simple child's toy, a toy train, and the observation of an ordinary baker that could unravel a covert operation, exposing secrets carefully hidden from the eyes of all but the most vigilant. And in that moment, the line between everyday life and espionage blurred, setting in motion events that would test courage, observation, and the extraordinary power of noticing the smallest details. How could a simple toy train rolling along wooden floors lead to the unmasking of a German spy courier? That question would puzzle Allied intelligence and village residents alike. At first glance, a child's toy seemed insignificant, a distraction, a piece of play. But in occupied France, where every step, every sound, and every object could carry meaning, even a small, misplaced item could reveal something far larger. In 1943, the village Pierre called home was a study in quiet vigilance. German patrols walked the streets in rigid formations, boots striking cobblestones with a disciplined rhythm. Uniformed soldiers checked papers, inspected carts, and lingered near doorways, their presence a constant reminder of surveillance and danger. Locals had learned to move carefully, speaking in measured tones, observing patterns rather than people. Everyday objects, bread baskets, milk pails, even toys, could be overlooked, but they could also betray secrets if noticed. That morning, Pierre had seen the toy train nudge a folded piece of paper from under the counter. Its edges were damp from the rain, and inked symbols formed a code that, to any ordinary observer, would appear as meaningless doodles. Yet Pierre's instinct told him otherwise. The note suggested a deliberate message, left for someone with eyes to read it. Who had placed it there, and why? The central dilemma quickly emerged. The message was real, its sender deliberate, yet acting on it too soon could be dangerous. The courier, likely trained to evade detection, had left subtle signals. If Pierre revealed the note to authorities or villagers prematurely, it might trigger retaliation or alert the spy to the breach. But ignoring it risked allowing the network to continue unchecked, potentially transmitting critical intelligence to German command. Questions multiplied. How long had the courier been operating in the region? Were there accomplices in the village, silently passing information? Could a single civilian, a baker with flour on his hands, alter the course of clandestine operations with a single observation? The toy train, once a symbol of innocence, had become a silent sentinel, marking the presence of someone moving in plain sight, leaving hidden traces amidst ordinary life. Pierre began to see the puzzle in its entirety. Small objects, mundane gestures, and overlooked routines formed a complex web of espionage. Observation, discretion, and careful deduction were his only tools. The stakes were high, and every decision mattered. Could a baker decipher the signs that professional spies and soldiers might have missed? And if he did, would he be able to use that knowledge to protect the village, intercept the courier, and disrupt a secret network without endangering those around him? History would later reveal that intelligence sometimes hinged not on grand strategies, but on the careful observation of everyday life, on noticing what others missed. And in this case, the answer lay hidden in plain sight: a toy train, a folded note, and the sharp eyes of a man who understood the extraordinary power of small details. The village rested in a narrow valley, its stone cottages clustered along a winding main street that led to the river. Slate roofs glistened with persistent rain, and smoke curled from chimneys into a gray sky, carrying the faint tang of coal and damp wood. Before the war, life had been simple. Villagers tended small gardens, exchanged goods at the market, and children played along the riverbanks. By 1943, occupation had cast a quiet tension over every routine. German patrols marched at dawn and dusk, boots striking cobblestones in unrelenting rhythm, while soldiers in crisp uniforms inspected deliveries, ration cards, and the occasional passerby. At the heart of the village, Pierre's bakery exuded warmth and a comforting smell of bread and yeast. Inside, the wooden floors were worn smooth, the counters polished from years of daily use. Shelves lined with loaves, rolls, and pastries contrasted with the small, flour-dusted table where Pierre kneaded dough, hands coated in a fine layer of white dust. It was ordinary work, predictable, and yet in this world, ordinary often concealed extraordinary consequences. Pierre, a man in his late 30s with keen eyes and careful hands, had always been attentive. Years of baking had honed his observation, noticing slight shifts in dough texture, subtle changes in flour quality, and the faintest hints of hidden pests. He carried the same attentiveness into life outside the oven, observing patterns: when soldiers passed, which villagers lingered in the streets, how packages arrived, was now part of his daily routine. In his mind, nothing escaped scrutiny, even if it seemed mundane to others. Life was cautious but functional. Villagers went about their chores with measured steps, children played in small groups under watchful eyes, and every delivery or visitor drew quiet attention. Pierre's shop was both a refuge and a center of quiet observation. He exchanged pleasantries with customers while noting who came and went, what parcels they carried, and whether unusual behavior marked their presence. It was in this ordinary setting that extraordinary events began to unfold. A misplaced toy train on the bakery floor, a folded note half hidden beneath the counter, and the subtle patterns of a German courier's movements would thrust Pierre into a hidden world of espionage. Without warning, the boundaries between flour, bread, and covert intelligence blurred. The village, which seemed untouched by the larger currents of war, became a stage for a delicate operation, with a single observant baker poised at its center. Pierre had not sought adventure or danger, yet in a place where every object and gesture could carry meaning, his ordinary life, the rhythm of the oven, the texture of dough, the rolling of a toy train, would intersect with history. A simple act of observation, the quiet attentiveness honed over years, would become his instrument in uncovering a secret network operating in plain sight. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. German couriers passed through the village on tight schedules, always careful, always silent. Trucks and bicycles appeared at odd hours, often carrying unmarked crates. Occasionally, soldiers lingered near intersections or narrow alleyways, eyes scanning doors and windows, boots echoing against cobblestones. To most villagers, these movements were routine, part of life under occupation. To Pierre, they were pieces of a puzzle, fragments that hinted at something hidden beneath the ordinary rhythms of village life. The first sign that something was amiss arrived with the toy train. Pierre's young son had left it on the wooden floor of the bakery, a simple object rolling toward the counter. As Pierre bent down to pick it up, he noticed a folded note tucked beneath the counter. Its edges were damp from the morning rain, and symbols were scrawled in a precise, deliberate hand. It was unlike any childish scribble. Each mark seemed encoded, purposeful. Pierre's pulse quickened. He understood, at once, that this was not an accidental delivery. It was a message. Over the next few days, patterns emerged. A stranger began appearing more frequently in the village square, always carrying packages of seemingly mundane appearance. He moved cautiously, glancing at passing German patrols, and always paused near the bakery, though he never entered. The notes left beneath the counter were increasingly complex, hidden in envelopes or tucked between floorboards, each carrying subtle markings or instructions in code. Pierre began to observe minor but telling details. The courier's movements were precise, rehearsed. His hands avoided surfaces, his boots followed exact paths along the streets, and his eyes scanned doors and windows, seeking unnoticed observation. Each interaction with villagers was fleeting, polite, and strategic. He seemed to understand that he was being watched, or at least that the village could contain witnesses, and he adapted accordingly. At the same time, villagers reported unusual deliveries. Milk cans were emptied at odd hours, crates appeared near warehouses with no markings, and children occasionally glimpsed the stranger exchanging brief messages with unknown figures before disappearing into alleys. The sense of unease grew. Though no one spoke openly, whispers circulated. Someone was moving through the village who did not belong, someone with secret intentions, and someone skilled at avoiding notice. Pierre realized the toy train was not merely a child's plaything. It had inadvertently revealed the courier's method of leaving messages in plain sight. Each note, each fold, each placement under the counter was a calculated signal. What seemed like a coincidence was now unmistakably deliberate. The ordinary rhythms of the bakery had collided with espionage, and Pierre found himself at the center of an unfolding operation where even a misstep could put him, his family, and the village in grave danger. The stage was set. A network of hidden communication was operating quietly under the watchful eyes of the occupiers, and the ordinary tools of civilian life, a toy train, a flour-dusted floor, and careful observation would become instruments in uncovering the enemy. Pierre's observations quickly evolved into a careful, methodical investigation. The toy train and the folded notes were no longer curiosities. They were evidence, subtle clues left by a trained courier. He began cataloging each note, marking the date, the time of arrival, and the precise location where it had appeared. Every symbol, every fold, and every crease was scrutinized. These were not casual marks. They were deliberate signals, designed to communicate information to someone who knew how to read them. The folded notes were peculiar. The ink varied slightly in color and thickness, as if multiple pens had been used. Some symbols resembled alphanumeric codes, while others suggested schematic instructions or directions. Pierre had no formal training in cryptography, but his experience as a baker had honed his observation skills. He knew how to detect patterns, subtle differences, and unusual repetitions. Slowly, A picture emerged. The courier was part of a larger network, moving information along established routes, and the toy train had inadvertently become a delivery tool, marking the location for a secret exchange. He began noticing patterns in the courier's movements. He arrived precisely after German supply trucks had passed, always on damp mornings or during fog, and often avoided the main street, choosing alleys that allowed him to move unnoticed. Pierre even noted slight behavioral tells, the way the courier adjusted his coat, the precise angle of his gaze, the careful placement of parcels. Every detail suggested training, discipline, and purpose. To verify his suspicions, Pierre took precautions. He hid the notes and observed the courier without drawing attention. Occasionally, he moved the toy train slightly, noting the courier's reaction on subsequent visits. Subtle changes in behavior confirmed that these objects were part of a communication system, not accidents. The network relied on civilians unknowingly serving as markers and drop points. Pierre's bakery, once a center of ordinary daily life, had become an unintentional hub of intelligence activity. The breakthrough came when he discovered a small, hidden marking on one of the notes, a sequence of numbers that matched the house numbers of nearby buildings. It was a map, a series of waypoints indicating where the courier delivered messages or packages. This revelation allowed Pierre to piece together the agent's route and possible contacts. It became clear that the network was extensive, connecting multiple villages and using ordinary citizens as unwitting facilitators. With each observation, Pierre compiled a dossier of clues, times, locations, hidden codes, and behavioral patterns. He even sketched diagrams of streets and alleyways, noting where the courier had paused, where he had deposited packages, and which windows he had glanced into. Each piece of information, though small in isolation, formed part of a larger intelligence mosaic. Through patient observation, careful documentation, and an extraordinary attention to detail, Pierre transformed ordinary moments into actionable evidence. The toy train, the folded notes, and his sharp eyes were slowly exposing the secret operations of a German spy courier, laying the groundwork for a discovery that would disrupt an enemy network without a single shot being fired. The tension in the village escalated quickly. The courier's visits became more frequent and deliberate, as if he sensed someone was observing. Each step he took carried caution. Gloved hands avoided surfaces, eyes flicked toward windows, and boots moved only on the worn paths of alleyways. German soldiers had begun increasing their patrols, lingering longer at corners and intersections. Every footstep, every click of a boot on cobblestone amplified the risk. Pierre realized that his careful observation could be discovered at any moment, putting himself, his family, and the village in grave danger. One rainy afternoon, the courier lingered near the bakery longer than usual. The soft clatter of the toy train on the floor, normally unnoticed, seemed to catch his attention. He paused, glanced toward the counter, then swiftly left, slipping into the fog that rolled down the streets. Pierre's pulse raced. He understood instantly that his presence and the notes hidden beneath the counter might have been detected. The courier's caution suggested awareness, and with awareness came the threat of retribution. Shortly after, villagers reported unusual activity. A German officer questioned a farmer near the square about deliveries, lingering suspiciously near the bakery. Another patrol checked doors and windows along the side street, scanning for unusual behavior. Pierre was hyper-aware of every sound, the creak of floorboards, the distant rumble of trucks, even the faint whistle of wind through the eaves. Each noise could mask or reveal danger. The courier's methods also grew more cautious. He left notes more subtly, tucked deeper beneath floorboards or inside empty flour sacks. Pierre's ability to intercept them required even greater discretion. A single mistake, revealing a note to the wrong villager or leaving it exposed, could alert the courier and trigger retaliation against the bakery or the village. At night, Pierre reviewed his notes in secrecy. Street lamps flickered against rain-slicked streets outside, shadows stretching long across the walls. He mapped the courier's routes, analyzed delivery times, and studied the coded symbols on each note. Each detail carried a dual weight, the promise of intelligence and the threat of danger if misjudged. The stakes were not theoretical. Exposure could mean imprisonment, deportation, or execution by German authorities. Even innocent villagers could be swept into suspicion. The toy train, once an innocuous object of play, had become a linchpin in a perilous intelligence operation. Pierre had to balance vigilance with invisibility, observation with discretion, and insight with patience. Every day, the bakery transformed from a place of warmth and routine into a front line of espionage. The clatter of flour, the hum of ovens, the rolling of a toy train, all ordinary sounds, were now potential signals, both for the enemy and for those who could detect the courier's pattern. Pierre's life had become a delicate balancing act, each moment a test of courage and judgment, with the safety of his family and the village hanging in the balance. The breakthrough came on a fog-choked morning when the village seemed suspended between rain and mist. Pierre had arranged the toy train in a deliberate position on the bakery floor, hoping to observe the courier's reaction without drawing attention. When the courier arrived, he paused, his gaze briefly fixing on the train before glancing toward the counter. In that fleeting moment, Pierre noticed it. The courier's movements had changed subtly, almost imperceptibly. He was aware someone had taken note of his patterns. That small realization shifted everything. Pierre examined the folded note left beneath the counter that day. It bore a faint watermark and a sequence of symbols that aligned perfectly with the markings on previous notes. They were not random, they were a code. Cross-referencing the notes with his meticulous observations of the courier's routes, timings, and behaviors, Pierre reconstructed a map of the network's movements. He could trace the courier's steps, anticipate deliveries, and even infer the locations of hidden contacts within the surrounding villages. The toy train, initially a mere object of a child's play, had inadvertently revealed a delivery point. Each placement, each fold of paper, each subtle mark formed a communication system meant to pass intelligence undetected. Pierre understood that the courier's confidence in invisibility was misplaced. The evidence had been right in front of him all along. Realizing the gravity of the discovery, Pierre acted with care. He packaged the notes, along with detailed sketches of the courier's paths and the locations of hidden messages, and entrusted them to a trusted member of the local resistance network. The materials were smuggled through safe routes to Allied intelligence officers. Every step had to be precise. One misstep could compromise the evidence or endanger lives. Within days, the intelligence officers decrypted the coded notes. The network, previously undetected, was exposed. The courier was identified, his delivery points mapped, and his connections to other operatives traced. Within weeks, authorities captured the spy, dismantling the local network and severing the communication lines that had been supplying critical information to German forces. The climax was quiet, yet momentous. No explosions or firefights marked the victory. Instead, it was a triumph of observation, patience, and subtlety. A single baker, armed only with keen awareness and careful note-taking, had disrupted an enemy operation. His ordinary bakery had become the unlikely stage of a covert intelligence breakthrough, where flour, wooden floors, and a toy train had played critical roles. The consequences rippled beyond the village. Vital intelligence was prevented from reaching German command, protecting nearby resistance operations and civilians from potential sabotage or reprisal. In a war dominated by armies and strategy, it was an ordinary civilian's attentiveness that altered the outcome of covert operations, proving that even the smallest details, often overlooked, could change the course of history. The impact of Pierre's discovery extended far beyond the quiet streets of his village. While grand battles and strategic maneuvers dominate most histories of World War II, the interception of a single German spy courier illustrated how civilian observation could directly influence the course of intelligence operations. Allied analysts recognized that the courier's network relied on subtlety, trust, and the assumption that ordinary villagers would overlook minor irregularities. Pierre had shattered that assumption, demonstrating that even the most carefully concealed messages could be exposed by sharp eyes and careful deduction. The coded notes hidden beneath the counter were not just paper, they were critical conduits of information. Each symbol and placement revealed routes, contacts, and timing for enemy movements. Had these messages reached German command, they could have jeopardized resistance activities, compromised supply lines, and led to the arrest or execution of locals. By capturing and decoding the notes, Allied intelligence disrupted a key communication channel in occupied France, safeguarding both civilian and military operations. Historians note that incidents like this were not isolated. Across occupied Europe, civilians, bakers, tailors, grocers, and children played subtle yet decisive roles in espionage. Their everyday tasks, honed skills, and local knowledge made them ideal observers of unusual patterns, from the movement of uniformed officers to the placement of packages. In Pierre's case, the ordinary rhythms of baking and family life intersected with espionage, revealing a hidden network that could have remained undetected for months. The operation underscored the importance of integrating civilian intelligence with formal military reconnaissance, while aerial photography, radio intercepts, and surveillance provided strategic oversight. It was Pierre's meticulous attention to detail and ability to decode hidden patterns that provided actionable intelligence. The event demonstrated the complementary power of ordinary observation and formal espionage, a lesson repeated in numerous small-scale operations across occupied territories. Beyond immediate tactical success, the incident carried symbolic weight. It highlighted the capacity of ordinary people to effect extraordinary outcomes. A child's toy, a flour-dusted floor, and the careful eyes of a baker became instruments of wartime strategy. History often remembers battles, leaders, and armies, but here, the subtle bravery and attentiveness of a civilian quietly shifted the balance of covert operations. Pierre's contribution reinforced the notion that intelligence was not solely the domain of trained operatives. Small details, the placement of objects, the timing of visits, the observation of seemingly trivial patterns, could expose entire networks. In this way, everyday vigilance became a form of resistance, an uncelebrated yet crucial element in the broader effort to undermine enemy operations. The interception of the German courier, facilitated by a simple toy train, serves as a lasting reminder that in war, ordinary life and extraordinary courage often intersect in unexpected, history-changing ways. After the war, the village gradually returned to a semblance of normal life, though the memory of occupation lingered in quiet corners, shuttered windows, and the cautious glances exchanged between neighbors. The streets, once patrolled by German boots, were now empty of uniformed scrutiny. Shops reopened fully, the bakery ovens glowed once more, and children played along cobblestone lanes, their laughter echoing where fear had once held sway. Yet Pierre's role in intercepting a spy courier remained largely invisible to the public. To the villagers, he was still the same diligent baker, kneading dough and shaping loaves with steady hands, unaware that his small acts of observation had influenced the course of wartime intelligence. Pierre himself never sought recognition. He continued his daily routine, observing patterns, noting details, and quietly ensuring the safety of his family and neighbors. The toy train, once the unlikely instrument of discovery, returned to its place on the floor, now a relic of an extraordinary chapter in ordinary life. Only Pierre and a few trusted individuals knew its significance. The way a child's plaything had revealed coded messages led to the identification of a German courier and exposed a hidden network that threatened both resistance operations and civilian lives. In time, declassified intelligence reports and historical studies highlighted the operation. Analysts noted how civilians in occupied Europe, tailors, bakers, grocers, and children, often played critical, though uncelebrated, roles in identifying irregularities, decoding signals, and gathering actionable information. Pierre's meticulous attention to detail, his careful documentation of the courier's movements, and his observations of seemingly mundane patterns were recognized as decisive factors in disrupting the enemy network. For the village, the legacy was more subtle, but no less profound. Ordinary life resumed, yet the memory of vigilance remained embedded in the community. Parents taught children to observe, to note details, and to recognize the significance of small, overlooked objects. Stories circulated quietly of how one man's attentiveness had prevented potential danger, and over time, the narrative became part of local lore, a testament to courage, perception, and the extraordinary potential of ordinary citizens during war. The incident also serves as a timeless lesson. History is not only shaped by generals, armies, or strategy rooms, but by the keen observation, initiative, and courage of civilians. Pierre's story underscores how seemingly insignificant objects, a toy train, a folded note, a hidden marking, can carry monumental consequences. It is a reminder that heroism often hides in plain sight, in ordinary professions, in mundane routines, and in the quiet decisions of those willing to observe and act. Today the village thrives, yet the bakery remains a silent witness to history. Its floors still bear the marks of years of work, its counters still scent the air with yeast and warmth, and the toy train rests in a corner, an enduring symbol of how ordinary life can intersect with extraordinary events, leaving a legacy that quietly shapes memory, history, and the courage of everyday people.